But the story right now is the NFL. That is the story right now, and it came out on Saturday that the NFL has come to an agreement with the CBA, with the Players Union. And what's interesting about this particular deal from the CBA is they're adding an extra game. They're not adding an extra week where you're going to have rest, which a lot of players are very upset about. And they're adding more teams to the playoff picture. Now, what does that do for some teams? Well, there'll be more 8-8 teams that'll make the playoffs now. Maybe even a 7-9 team. That gives a chance to some of these other teams that were not expected to make the playoffs. And what makes it so interesting is because if you have a hot team getting into the playoffs, if they start the season 3-7 and they win their next 4 or 5 games and they slip right into the playoffs, they could be the hot team and they can roll right over to the Super Bowl. So that's what makes it interesting. What doesn't make it interesting for players is the fact that they might be making a little bit more money, which they will, because they're playing more games. There'll be more TV deals, more millions of dollars for these teams and these owners to make. So obviously the players will make a piece of it. The problem is these players already have problems staying healthy all season long. Now you're adding an extra game and possibly an extra 2 or 3 games in the playoffs for some of these teams to go all the way to the Super Bowl. That means if you're a wild card team, you're going to have to go through 4 games, counting the Super Bowl. To get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to win, and win the Super Bowl, you're going to have to win 4 games. If you're a wild card team.
Well, you had to do that anyway if you were a wild card team.
Well, I mean 5 games. If I'm not mistaken.
5 games.
5
okay,
games.
Yeah.
What throws me off about this deal, and I was very surprised that the Players Union actually agreed to this, was the fact that a lot of people like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, they were completely against it. Because both quarterbacks, especially guys like Aaron Rodgers, who has fought injury year in and year out, this guy cannot stay healthy for his team and his organization. Now he's got to play an extra game in the regular season, which could implicate where they're going to land in the playoffs or if they don't make the playoffs. And there are a lot of players, a lot of more players now, people that are getting older, and they're no longer ageless, that are going to have to deal with this for the next 3 or 4 years as a pro.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with a wear and tear of certain positions, offensive line, defensive line, running backs that already have injury issues. Their shelf lives are going to be even shorter now. We have already seen teams try to platoon running backs now, and that's going to only further it with 17 games. Michael Thomas even said this is going to lead to a lot of load management with certain players too, and players should really start to want to do that and keep track of it more because of this.
If I was a player right now, I would not be happy. Not because I'm going to make more money, because obviously these players want to make more money. They want to build more opportunity to give their families more opportunity in the future, and their families' families, and their families' families. Because the more money they make, the more money they save, the more money they can invest, and the more money their kids and their kids' could have for the rest of their lives. The problem with this is when you look at the big picture, these teams are going to have to now protect some of their players, their quarterbacks. They might need to go after a backup quarterback that could play 3-4 extra games in a regular season because you don't want to wear out your starting quarterback going into the playoffs.
You're seeing that a lot in baseball with the way rosters are managed now, too. It's a lot about depth, a lot about versatility. Now you're going to see that definitely with football, too. Backup quarterbacks, backup pass rushers. We're already seeing running backs and receivers plentiful. They rotate all the time with those positions. So you're definitely right where that's going to happen. And like I said, load management is going to be very key, especially with younger players, to make sure they don't wear them out too early in their career so they have good longevity.
And that's why when I look at the big picture of this deal for the NFL, you can like it. As a fan, you love it because you're going to get to see an extra game of football and you're going to see more games in the playoffs. And by the way, your team that usually can't sneak into the playoffs with a 9-7 record or an 8-8 record is going to get into the playoffs, which anytime, and you know this about the NFL, Speedy, all you got to do is get into the playoffs and you can go all the way and win a Super Bowl. It is absolutely possible. We've seen wild card teams. We've seen a sixth place team or the last place wild card team go all the way to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. We saw it with the Giants. We saw it with the Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers in the last 10 years. We've seen it. So it's possible for it to happen. But now you have the NFL, and I understand Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is all about making money. We all know that. He tried to hide CTE from the players union and tried to hide CTE throughout the league for all these years. And now look at Patrick Willis retiring and all the different NFL players retiring because of these situations with brain injury and CTE, as you know, with the Aaron Hernandez situation. But now the NFL is trying to find more ways to make money. The TV deals are pretty much intact. They're making money off of these deals as far as advertisements and sponsorships with Reebok and Nike and Adidas. But now the NFL is starting to look at the big picture. We need to find more revenue. We need to find more ways to make money. And how do we do that? We add more games and more opportunity for these other teams. Like you think about it, the Jets were 7-9 this year. The Jets could have sneaked in the playoffs if this was implicated this past year. They could have snuck right into the playoffs or would have been a borderline playoff team.
Yeah, they were currently one or two game, the first or second team out if they were a 7-team playoffs, because the Steelers was the next team in. And if they were to do that, they could have had a tiebreaker. If the Steelers lost too, they would have both been 8-9. Who knows what would have happened?
And that's why I know a lot of teams and a lot of owners are going to love this, because their team has a chance to make the playoffs every single year. It's teams like the Jets and the Giants or the Buffalo Bills that always are one game or two games short. All these different teams that just couldn't sneak into the playoffs year in and year out. Now they have the chance.
The Bears from like 2008 to 2013, I think 4 different times they were the first team out of the playoffs.
And that's why, in the big picture, it works for the owners. It works for the league, because it's all about money to these guys. I don't understand how the players' union, when you have Russell Wilson say no to it, practically half the quarterbacks said nay to it. They did not want this. But then there are offensive linemen. And remember, the players' union, all the players get to vote. And there was a significant high vote for players that wanted this implicated into the NFL.
Which is bizarre, because this, besides last year, where you saw a lot of quarterbacks go down, a lot of quarterbacks that were normally durable go down, you look at offensive linemen, running backs, defensive linemen, they're usually more injury-prone positioned, yet it seems like more of them voted for yes, which is interesting. Probably for the money's sake, because running backs are now getting paid more, but usually don't. Linebackers haven't really been paid much, and offensive linemen, unless you're a tackle, you don't get paid much. So,
all right, so here's some of the deal. So what are the players getting? So I'm reading this off of ESPN. For starters, more money in form of higher share of league revenue beginning of 2021. This year's players will get 47% of all league's revenue, in keeping with their number of from the current CBA. The expansion of the postseason by 2 teams will generate an estimated $150 million, according to the NFLPA memo. And 47% of that is $70.5 million. So that will be an additional revenue going to the players that they wouldn't have received without the playoff expansion. So now you're seeing the players are going to make $70 more million if they make the playoffs. Now, I'm not saying that each game they are going to have to go through the playoffs all the way to the Super Bowl. If they get to the Super Bowl, there's a possibility that the players could make $70.5 million every single year. Mm-hmm. Now you look at the 47% revenue estimated opportunity for them to make in year number 1 in 2021. That is a enormous amount. Because if you think, and I know a lot of people throw this off and they look at it, well, what do these players need money? First of all, the NFL, there's no guaranteed money. They get a guaranteed signing bonus. That's what they get. So let's say Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott got what, $65, $67 million contract? I don't know. Over 5 years. He had an estimate of $40-something million guaranteed. So that is his money. $40-something million is guaranteed to go to him. Now they can absolutely drop his contract after 2 or 3 years and not have to pay him the rest of the money. It's not like the NBA. It's not like the major leagues. It's not like that. That's guaranteed money. Even the NHL, it's guaranteed money. The NFL, there is no guarantees that if you get a $110, $120 million contract like Aaron Donald, you're going to get all that money. Now, he might possibly, because he got it in the prime of his career, and is one of the best pass rushers we've seen in a very, very long time. But a lot of people are not fortunate, a.k.a. Muhammad Wilkerson from the New York Jets. He got an $86 million contract from the New York Jets, which was a $38 million signing bonus. That's all he got from the Jets. Because after 2.5 years, the Jets dropped him.
Yeah, he was too injury prone, and
but that has nothing to do with it.
Even one of the years he was.
That has nothing to do with it. There is no guarantees with the NFL. What this does now for the players, if they make the playoffs, they have an opportunity to make extra money. This extra game that they're going to add on to the schedule, they're going to make a significant extra amount of money that these players from the Players Union are actually going to split into their contracts. That is a lot of money because that is guaranteed money.
And now you're talking about adding a 7th playoff team. That's almost half the conference now. 7 out of 16 teams would make the playoffs. That's going to increase revenue for each round's games and overall players. And if it is, like you were saying, more depth-oriented now with good backup quarterbacks, good backup pass rushers, more than you see that would start on other teams, that revenue is going to flow a lot.
Listen to this also. Starting in 2021, the players will get at least 48% of the league's revenue, and that would figure could get higher depending on how the league does in negotiations to the new TV deals. Once the league moves to 17 games a season, the player's share of revenue includes a media kicker, which constitutes an additional share of revenue based on the size of the TV contracts. According to the NFLPA memo, if the league's TV revenue increases by 60%, the player's share of revenue increases to 48.5%, which is a lot. 0.5% is a lot of money. That shares can climb as high as 48.8% if the league's TV revenues increase by 120% or more. And it cannot be reduced via stadium credits, meaning that any money for the owners take off the top of the revenue pile for the stadium construction or renovations cannot push the player's share of revenue below 48%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or whatever the media kicker brings it to during the life of the deal, which is an 11-year deal.
That changes a lot, though, because if teams do end up moving or players end up moving and as a result of expansion, that'll make a difference in terms of them being able to keep their money and not have it be relied upon in terms of what the stadium has. So that's a very interesting thing, especially if they do expand internationally, too.
Which players will benefit from most of the new system? Here we go. They explain why some different players, like the quarterback, will make more money. Now, here it is. It seems lower earning players, roughly 60% of the NFL players, operate on minimum salary deals, will get the most significant bumps in pay, at least at the beginning. Minimum salaries are increasing by around 20% immediately. A player with less than 1 year of the NFL experience is set to earn $510,000 this year under the current deal. That number rises to $610,000 in 2020, and if the new deal is signed, and the minimum salary for players with less than 1 year of experience rises incredibly throughout the deal, reaching almost $1 million by 2030.
All right,
which is a significant amount. That's almost $500 and some odd thousand that a new player will make off this new deal. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, and it's going to be very widespread considering the depth of rosters now. I don't think they said anything about expanding the total rosters, but I know there's been talks of that in the past too. So that could be the next step, and if that's the case, that's even more money.